Island Crimes and Mysteries with Newells.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Ireland Crimes and Mysteries. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you're a returning listener, I want to say a big thank you for your continued support. If this is your first time listening to my podcast, welcome. It's great to have you on board. So without further ado, let's get started on today's story. So today, guys, we're going to meander down the mystery route, and we're going to chat about a man we will be calling Peter Bergmann. But we don't think that's his real name. We think it's an alias. And I'm going to tell you his story, and you can decide at the end about Peter, his motives, and why Peter did what he did. So join me now as we embark on a journey deep into the heart of this perplexing case that has literally left investigators scratching their heads. The curious case of Peter Bergmann. Imagine a man who arrived in the coastal town of Sligo, which is in Ireland, with a hidden identity and a dark secret, his true purpose known only to him. As we delve into the web of intrigue surrounding Peter Bergmann, we'll explore the strange circumstances that led to his demise, the ambiguous decisions he made, and the enduring questions that still surround his story. So who was Peter Bergmann? And why did he choose Sligo as his final destination? What drove him to adopt a new identity, discard his belongings, and embark on a journey shrouded in mystery? Let's take a closer look. But to begin with, for those of you who are not familiar with Sligo, it is a coastal seaport and is the county town for County Sligo. With a population of nearly 21,000, it is the county's largest urban centre. It's on the west coast, facing out towards the Atlantic Ocean, and it was the inspiration for poet W.B. Yeats and also his brother artist Jack B. Yeats. On the morning of the 16th of June 2009, a father and son who had been out for an early morning swim in Ross's Point, which is a small picturesque seaside village in County Sligo, made a grim discovery. The body of a middle-aged man had been washed up on the beach.
Something like almost something from a shop window, like a mannequin that was in the sand. And of course, as I got closer, I realised it was actually a person, and that he seemed to have drowned. That was a little shock for the system.
Authorities were called, and by 8:10 a.m. that morning, he had been pronounced dead, and the body had been removed to Sligo General Hospital mortuary, and a post-mortem was carried out the following day. The man was carrying no identification on his person, and all attempts to find out who this man was came to nothing. Because nobody was able to find out who this man actually was, he was later buried in an unmarked grave in Sligo. His last few days alive were captured on various CCTV cameras around the area, but rather than helping with the investigation, they just created more questions as to who he was than answers. So who was this man? Where did he come from? How could he leave no trace of himself? The first confirmed sighting of the man calling himself Peter Bergmann was in Derry at the Ulster Bus Depot on the 12th of June 2009, where he was seen getting off a bus. He was a slender, clean-shaven man, thought to be either in his 50s or 60s. How he entered Northern Ireland remains a mystery. He then jumped on another bus headed to Sligo, some 2.5 hours from Derry. When he arrived at the Sligo bus station around 6:30 p.m, he got a taxi and asked the taxi driver to take him to a cheap hotel. The first hotel they tried was full, so they drove to the Sligo City Hotel. This is where he's first spotted on CCTV coming in the main door of the hotel and walking up to the reception desk. He had on his person a black shoulder bag and carried another small black bag in his hand. He paid €65 per night for 3 nights at the hotel in cash. And this is when he gave his name to the reception clerk as that of Peter Bergmann. He gave an address in Vienna, Austria as his home address when he signed the register. Unfortunately, he wasn't asked by the clerk to produce any confirmation of his identity. It was confirmed by both the taximan and the hotel staff that he did appear to have a thick German or Austrian accent. He was again seen on the hotel's CCTV on Saturday the 13th of June, leaving the hotel and coming back to the hotel some 13 times. And every time he left the hotel, he was seen carrying a purple plastic bag full to the brim. But each time he returned, there was no sign of the purple bag. The burning question is, what was he doing with the bags, which appeared full when he left the hotel? Was he disposing of all his worldly belongings, anything that could identify who he was? He was spotted on several cameras around the town on that Saturday, but none captured him actually disposing of the bags. He appeared to be using the camera blind spot to carry out his activity. He almost appeared like everything was pre-planned. So it is a mystery what happened to them and what was even in them.
It was clear from early morning that he had a purple plastic carrier bag. He would have that each time that he left the hotel, going out in and around Sligo. And when he returned on each occasion, he didn't appear to be carrying any bag. The purple plastic bag was becoming more significant. It was quite clear that he was disposing of items of personal property in and around Sligo.
Island Crimes and Mysteries.
On that Saturday, he also visited the post office and bought 8 stamps and airmail stickers. On Sunday, June the 14th, he got another taxi and asked the taxi driver if he could recommend a quiet beach where he could go for a swim. The taxi driver recommended Ross's Point, which is about 7 to 8 kilometres from Sligo town, and drove him out there. When they arrived at the beach, Peter got out of the taxi, had a quick look around, then got back into the taxi and asked the taxi driver to drive him back to Sligo. The driver of the taxi did say that in the course of their conversation, Peter had mentioned he was from Austria. On the Monday, after requesting a late checkout, Peter was yet again caught on CCTV at the reception desk, checking out of the hotel. He had a black shoulder bag and another full purple plastic bag, and a different carry-on bag to the one he had when he arrived. He checked out and left after having had very little interaction with the hotel staff during his stay, and made his way to the bus station. By the time he arrived at the bus station, the small black bag that he had been carrying had now disappeared. Where that ended up, no one knows. The cameras next picked him up inside the bus station cafe shop, where he had ordered a coffee and a toasted cheese sandwich. As he sat there drinking his coffee and eating his sandwich, he took out a piece of paper and started writing some notes on it, after which he proceeded to tear it up and throw it in the bin. Was it a checklist of stuff he needed to do or had done, and he was just ticking it off?
Did appear to take paper from his pocket and wrote notes. Now obviously we were working in reverse. It was 3-4 days afterwards when we were viewing this footage, so we didn't have the benefit of being able to secure whatever piece of paper he had torn up.
He finally got on a bus headed out to Ross's Point, where he had been the previous day, to check out in the taxi. He purchased a one-way ticket from the bus driver. The bus arrived in Ross's Point mid-afternoon, where he disembarked. He was witnessed to be on the beach that day by several people, as he stuck out for the very fact he wasn't really dressed for a day at the beach, in his dark-coloured trousers, a leather jacket and a shirt. Some people stating he looked very out of place, while others said he looked deep in thought. But he did exchange pleasantries with passers-by with a simple hello. The last confirmed sighting of Peter was between 10:30pm and 11:50pm, the witness being unsure of the exact time. The reason people remembered seeing him was partly the fact that it was so late at night and partly because of his attire. The next time he would be seen was the following morning, when his lifeless body was found washed up on the beach in Ross's Point. When he was found, he was wearing Speedo swimming bottoms, but also had a shirt and his underwear on. His leather jacket and other items of clothing would later be discovered folded up in a neat pile further down the beach. A bar of soap, a few bits of change and a box of aspirin were among the items found in his pocket. But no formal ID was amongst his clothing. All of his clothing had the tags removed from them, so you couldn't tell where he had bought them. It appeared Peter had gone to extreme lengths to make sure that when he was found, the trail to his actual real identity would be very cold indeed. The address he had given would later be found to have never existed, and there was no such person as Peter Bergmann, fitting his age or description. The Peter Bergmann who was staying in Sligo for the last few days never existed.
He signed in using the name Peter Bergmann, Bergmann. Some countries use one N, others use two. The indications are that Austrian nationals use two N's. That's the name he used, that's the name he signed, with an address in a city called Wien, or Wien in Austria. He didn't provide any documentary proof of his identity. We know from inquiries with the Austrian police that such an address does not exist, nor has it done so for many, many years. It's a vacant lot.
As I said, his remains were then transferred to Sligo General Hospital, where a post-mortem was carried out. Obviously, the assumption was after his body was found on the beach that he had drowned. But if this was the assumption you had come to, you may very well be mistaken. The external examination of his body by the coroner noted that there was no signs of foul play or saltwater drowning, with no obvious frothing around the nose or mouth. On examining the body further, it was found that Peter had prostate cancer, which had metastasised to his bones and other organs in his body. They also noted that it appeared he had suffered at least 2 heart attacks previously, and only had 1 kidney, the other having been removed. Oddly, there was no traces of any painkillers or any medication for that matter in his system in the toxicology report, which the coroner did find strange considering his advanced cancer. Bone cancer can be very painful, requiring very strong pain relief. The coroner stated that judging by the advanced stage of his cancer, he would surmise that Peter only had a few weeks to live and would have been in a significant amount of pain and would have required prescription medication to handle that pain. Yet nothing was found in his system, not even the aspirin found on his belongings. Cause of death was noted as acute cardiac arrest, not drowning. Meanwhile, the Gardaí were tasked with trying to find out who Peter Bergmann was so his family could be contacted. Initial inquiries led them to the hotel where they discovered what they thought was his name. This was the one he had given at reception when he was booking in for his 3-day stay. But they then found out that unfortunately reception had not asked for proof of identity. A search through European passport data and subsequently North American passport data found no matches for Peter Bergmann. This led Gardaí to assume he was using a false name. Furthermore, the address he had given at the hotel when he booked in didn't even exist. His wallet and phone and other personal items were never found. Still photographs from the CCTV footage and post-mortem were distributed throughout Ireland and the rest of Europe, but nobody ever came forward claiming to know him. None of the purple bags that he was seen with leaving the hotel were ever found. Peter Bergmann, or whoever Peter Bergmann actually was like an enigma, a ghost. It was hard to believe that in modern times it was still impossible to find out who he actually was or where he had come from. What we know for sure is that he definitely wasn't from Sligo. He had been seen getting on the bus from Derry, and when he arrived in Sligo, he wasn't very familiar with the layout of the town, or so it appeared. And it seemed in actuality that he had travelled there under a false name to end his life. But why? The burning question was, when he arrived in Derry, where had he arrived from? If he had travelled into the country by plane or boat, which we are assuming, judging by his accent, one would assume he would have had to show some sort of ID of some description, such as a passport as he passed through customs or security. Of course, he probably did have his actual passport on him when he travelled into the country and then got rid of it once he arrived here. The only course of action in that scenario would be to go through every airport in the country and go through all their CCTV. Gardaí did not know when he arrived in the country, what country he had come from and how long he had been in Ireland. So taking that course of action would have been like literally looking for a needle in a haystack. Judging from the results of his autopsy, there is no way that Peter Bergmann would not have been aware of the fact that he was extremely ill, having end-stage metastatic cancer. And also having suffered 2 previous heart attacks. He wasn't in good condition. A worker at the bus station had said that he asked him about buses and timetables of buses to Ross's Point, and he felt when he was speaking to him that he appeared like he was in pain or a little stressed. Of course, the fact that he wasn't taking anything for his cancer would be reason enough for him to be in pain and stressed out. There's no doubt about that. The Gardaí theorised that he then spent the day walking up and down the beach at Ross's Point after having disposed of all his worldly belongings in various bins around the town, probably waiting for high tide, and when the beach would be empty, he would enter the water. Maybe he knew that he only had a few weeks to live, and worried about what his ending would be like, he decided he was going to leave on his own terms before it got to the stage where that decision would no longer be in his hands. One would wonder, with the fact that there was no water found in his lungs, did he start to swim out to sea with the intention of ending it all? But fate intervened and he had a 3rd and final heart attack, this one proving fatal, dying instantly before being swept back onto the beach. But what led him to this drastic course of action, if this is actually what happened? A few theories have been bandied about. The first theory, of course, was the fact that he was terminally ill. And then another theory was that maybe he had life insurance. So if he was going to end it all, the life insurance wouldn't pay out. So he needed to disappear permanently. But of course, it can take up to 7 years to be declared officially dead after going missing. He didn't want to be found, so he went to a country that nobody would know who he was, ended his life, and in the future, after being missing for at least 7 years, he would be declared dead and his family would be able to draw down on the life insurance. Of course, this is not just another theory. We don't know for sure. It does sound like an extraordinary length to go to. But ultimately, if he was trying to end it all, he ended up dying of natural causes before he had the chance, which in itself is unbelievable. He could have simply been going out for a swim, but why hang around the beach all day and wait until it's dark and no one's around to go into the water? He was wearing swimming trunks, despite the fact he had underwear on and a t-shirt. He could have been out for his swim and swimming back in and had the heart attack before being washed back up onto the beach. But why was he wearing his underwear over his swimming trunks? And also wearing his shirt? Well, we know he called himself Peter Bergmann because that's the name he gave in the hotel at the reception desk. But nobody matching this name for any male matching his description or age was found in any passport databases. He paid for everything in cash, which of course leaves no paper trail. But then again, most hotels would ask for proof of contact details whether you pay with cash or card. For the very simple reason that if you left something behind, wrecked the room, broke something, there are lots of reasons to ask for proof of ID. It wouldn't have been that unusual in 2009 to pay cash. It's different nowadays. Everything is more or less online, isn't it? You'd either ring in advance and pay over the phone, or you'd have done it online. So nowadays, there would be a paper trail. Then the address that he gave doesn't exist either. The postal code he gave, 4472, does not exist in Vienna or anywhere else in Austria for that matter. That, of course, doesn't mean he's not from Austria, but it does mean he gave a false address. People theorised that he could have been German. Both accents are fairly similar when spoken in English. The only reason people thought Peter Bergmann was Austrian is because that's what he said he was. And if you're trying to disappear, chances are he's going to make that part of the story up as well. So long story short, he could have been from literally anywhere. When it comes to the purple plastic bag that he left the hotel on several occasions with and then returned empty-handed, a lot of the times they appeared to be very full when he walked out of the hotel, and I assume he had the purple bag in his pocket on his return. He was never actually caught on camera or seen by anyone actually disposing of these bags. So what did he do with them? Gardaí were under the assumption that he was getting rid of all of his personal belongings in various parts of the town to make it harder for his real identity to be found. Some of these items could have had identifying information he didn't want found out. He had left the hotel at least 13 times, if not 14, with these bags. So what was in them? Was it the contents of the suitcase and toilet bag he arrived with, that over the course of 2 days he gradually disposed of? But why bring all this stuff with you in the first place if you're coming over with that particular end goal in mind? Why not just leave everything at home? Why, over the course of 2 days that you were actually in the town, go around disposing of everything in garbage bins to cover your identity? It doesn't really make sense. The Gardaí had searched all bins and anywhere that he could have disposed of the items, like car parks and public parks, but nothing was found. But then again, they didn't know what they were looking for, unless they came across a full purple plastic bag. Detective John O'Reilly, who was working on the case, said that Sligo was full of cameras, and basically you couldn't go anywhere without being caught on a camera. But I do think the fact that he would have actually been able to see the cameras, as they were generally very obvious around the place, he would have known not to do his dumping in front of them. The only thing that he was seen throwing away was that note in the bus station that he tore up after writing. This was caught on camera. But unfortunately, this footage wasn't found until several days after the whole investigation had started, so all the bins at the bus station had already been emptied. So that note, and whatever was written on it, like everything else in this story, remains a mystery. Then we have the visit to the post office, where he bought 8 stamps and airmail stickers. Seemingly he had posted some letters, but this can't be 100% proven because, of course, the cameras at the post office, the files were corrupted, so they couldn't watch the CCTV back and could only take the word of the staff there. So another dead end. But it does beg the question, who was he sending the letters to? Was he sending letters to family and friends, telling them what he was about to do or what he had done, I suppose, by the time the letters got there? Explaining his reasons for doing what he did? Who knows? He could have also been writing to somebody to say, "Don't give away my identity. I don't want to be found." The possibilities are actually endless of what he could have said in these letters, but the fact of the matter is, whoever he posted these letters to never came forward. No one ever tried to claim his body. The letters would have had an Irish stamp on them, so if they were sent to family or friends, they would have known their origin. And you would think when he was deemed missing that they would have followed it up, but nobody ever has. Again, why? Plus, the post office couldn't trace the destination of the letters, so that particular line of investigation dried up as well.
On the Saturday itself, we established that he had gone into the post office here in Sligo. He had purchased 8 82-cent stamps and airmail stickers. Now, we were never able to establish where those letters were posted, to who the letters were posted, or when he posted them. But certainly he had obviously correspondence to send to someone, somewhere. Going back to the letters that he posted, I believe he has friends, he has family, somewhere.
Island Crimes and Mysteries.
As the Gardaí met dead end after dead end, the decision was made after a 5-month investigation to bury Peter Bergmann in an unmarked grave which he shares with another unknown occupant. 4 members of the Gardaí attended his funeral along with 2 funeral directors, which to me sounds kind of sad. It's sad to think that at the end of your life, nobody who actually knew or cared about you or cared for you was at your funeral to say goodbye. But it does look like this is what he wanted. In 2015, the French newspaper Le Monde reported that they had contacted the Austrian police about the case, as Peter had given his address as being in Vienna. Astonishingly, they said the Gardaí had never contacted them about Peter, which I find strange considering still photos had been distributed around other European countries, according to the Gardaí. The mystery of what happened to Peter, or why it happened, or why he went to such great lengths to make sure his identity would never be found, is a real head-scratcher, and probably will remain so. even down to the fact that he was found with his swimming trunks on and his underwear on and his shirt on. Had he been out for a swim? The fact that there was salt water found on his skin tells us he had gone into the water. Maybe he had come back in and was getting changed when he had a heart attack. Maybe he hadn't intended to kill himself at all by swimming out to sea. The fact that he left nothing in his hotel room and none of his other belongings like his phone were ever found. All we're left with is the clothing that was found on the beach and a few bits in his pockets. And even with the clothes, he'd cut off most of the labels, so the shops that they were bought in couldn't be even traced. Although there was a label on his leather jacket, but that kind of led nowhere, as it was a company called C&A, which seemingly has lots of stores around Europe. It was discovered that his shoes were made by a German company, so there's that. The rest of the contents of his pockets included some money, the box of aspirin, a box of plasters, his watch, and lastly, some soap that was from a hotel he had stayed in. Not the hotel in Sligo, but another hotel. The hotel in question could not be tracked down as it was a generic soap used in lots of hotels. But interestingly enough, not in any Irish hotels. The box of plasters were from a brand that originated in Germany, as was the box of aspirin. So there was nothing really substantial enough to direct the Gardaí in any particular way. But it did look like all roads led in a Germanic direction. The long-sleeved blue shirt that he was wearing when he checked out of the hotel was never found, nor were his glasses, any of his bags, or any of his other belongings. Just what was found in his pockets. Now, are there any other ways that this man could be identified? Well, there's DNA. Lots of people nowadays find long-lost family members through the likes of Ancestry or MyHeritage. But back in 2009, was this even a thing? I know DNA was around. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm sure they kept samples from his autopsy. So could they not do a DNA test on that and upload it to Ancestry.com and see if it matches with anyone? A distant relative even. At the time when Gardaí took his fingerprints and DNA, they did run them through the database and got no matches. But that just meant he wasn't a criminal. Of course, things have improved immeasurably since 2009. So maybe if they were to revisit the case, the outcome might be different. If they uploaded his DNA to one of these ancestry sites, who knows what might happen. Nobody matching his description has ever been listed as a missing person in Austria or Germany or any other country for that matter, which in itself is strange. You would think somebody somewhere would be missing him. But then again, when you think about it, he did go to an awful lot of trouble by the looks of it to remain anonymous. So should we be respecting that and just leave him rest in peace now? Does the fact that we can't identify him really mean that we should identify him? Would it be more to satisfy our own curiosity and satisfying the mystery that we would be doing it for, rather than genuinely wanting to find out who he is? As I said, he obviously didn't want to be found, so maybe that's the way it should be left. It's a tricky one because, on the other hand, then you're thinking, is there family out there that's desperately trying to find him? But then at the time there was so much in the news about him, why hasn't anybody come forward? It's now been 14 years since Peter Bergmann was found on the beach in Ross's Point. And to be honest, when researching about Peter, I came to the conclusion that this is what he wanted. He came to Ireland, got rid of all his worldly belongings and anything that could potentially identify him, went out to the beach with the intention of ending it all on his terms, but fate intervened. I know it seems like extraordinary lengths to go to disappear, and you'd wonder why he felt he had to do that. He probably thought his body would be swept out into the Atlantic, never to be seen again, and he would simply disappear, and no one would have known the difference. Were there other reasons than being terminally ill? Was he running from someone, in trouble, afraid? No matter what the reason, the end result is he died. We don't know who he is. Nobody claimed his body, and he is now buried in an unmarked grave. We'll probably never know, and it will probably remain a mystery forevermore. Obviously, he wasn't expecting to have a heart attack, but the end result ended up being what he ultimately had set out to do by the looks of it. He ended up succeeding in doing what none of us thought was probably possible to do in the 21st century. Completely hide your identity so you will never be found. But then again, he's just one man. A whole plane with 239 people on board managed to disappear in 2014. That's a whole other podcast, I'm sure. Whatever his reason or plans for doing it, that's obviously what he wanted, and he succeeded in making it happen. So maybe we just have to respect that decision. As we conclude our exploration of the mysterious life and strange circumstances surrounding the death of Peter Bergmann, we're left with more questions than answers. The circumstances surrounding his identity, his motivations, and his final moments remain shrouded in uncertainty, reminding us that sometimes the most beguiling mysteries are the ones that refuse to yield their secrets. It's a reminder that even in our age of information and surveillance, there are individuals who can elude us and leave us pondering the depths of their motives and intentions.
In effect, he was writing the last days of his life, and it was all done on his own terms, according to his own plan. And that's quite obvious now with the benefit of hindsight.
So guys, that's it for today's episode of the Ireland Crimes and Mysteries podcast. Again, thanks for your listenership, and don't forget to subscribe to the show and hit that auto download so you never miss an episode. Until the next time, keep your eyes open and your mind curious. This podcast has been compiled from information gathered in the public sphere, like news articles, documentaries, and open source material that can be found on the web. Everything in this podcast is alleged unless a conviction has taken place.
You've been listening to Ireland Crimes and Mysteries with Newells. Join us for another episode coming real soon.